Thank you for purchasing your M300 RTK combo. This is your ready to deploy video from RMUS. We'll be walking through the hardware, software, and the first flight of your M300. So let's get started. There can be several combinations of hardware that you may have purchased. The RMUS package includes landing pads, cones, and vests. Additionally, extra batteries, camera payloads, SD cards, and USB cables will be included in your package. Check your contents and make sure that there's nothing missing and contact RMUS if there is. The GPC case we have here will accommodate equipment and most of the hardware needed for your missions. M300, landing gear, batteries, enterprise smart remote, SD card holder, camera payloads such as the Z30, XT2, H20 or H20T. Under the camera payload cavity, you will see more space for another set of batteries, as well as additional space for propellers, chargers, cables, and other miscellaneous equipment. Now, we will remove the M300 from the case. First, you will attach the landing gear. Move the props out of the way when doing so. Align the gear to the slot. Then, with a quarter turn, the landing gear will be locked in. Take care when removing the aircraft, as this is the most common situation to damage the aircraft. Watch that the arms or props are not catching on anything. RMUS recommends not transporting or shipping the M300 with batteries stored in it. This creates unnecessary stress on the locking mechanism for which it was not designed for. Once the M300 is on its gear, we can unfold the arms. You will note that the rear arms do have a slight angle in unfolding. You will want to do these first, avoiding any stress on the joint. The locking mechanism is also a quarter turn, but make sure they are tight to ensure safe flight. DJI has made a very simple way to attach the payloads. You can see here the white and red dot on the front. This coincides with the dot on the M300. First, remove the dust caps. Make sure the dots align, but do not force the connection. Turn the lock, then confirm the payload is secure. To remove the payload, there is a lock button that will need to be held down while rotating it back. The M300 uses the TB60 batteries for flight. A single press of the button will quickly check the state of charge. It is also highly recommended to label these batteries in pairs. Always fly, charge, and store batteries in pairs. Should you have any issues with one battery, consider the pair to have an issue. Do not use batteries that are showing any negative conditions and contact RMUS tech support as soon as possible. The M300 has a separate charging case. With it, you can charge the TB60 flight batteries, WB37 remote batteries, also known as Crystal Sky battery. The USB Type-C port is used for firmware updates. Plug into power and turn on the case. When loading the battery, make sure that the connectors are free of debris and dirt and do not force the batteries into the slot. Once loaded, you can see the charge status of each battery here. Also, monitor your batteries while charging. Do not leave them unattended. When charging the smart remote, use the provided AC box and USB connector. This will charge the internal battery. You can add the WB37 battery to the back to increase battery life. A quick tap of the power button shows the state of charge, while a quick tap, then hold for 3 seconds, turns it on. All updates will be done by RMUS techs before receiving your package, but you will need to connect to Wi-Fi, set up an account on DJI before using Pilot app. From here, we should be ready for our first flight. Let's head out to the field. Okay, now we're out of the field. I went ahead and unpacked the M300 out of the case. I went ahead and made sure my landing gear was locked, my arms are open and locked. But I went ahead and pulled out my smart remote, and we're going to press it once and hold it down to turn it on. We're going to go ahead and wait for the app to load. And while I'm doing that, I usually just do a quick walkthrough and make sure that everything is ready to go as far as taking off. So I want to make sure that my arms are good and locked and all 4 of them are tight, that they're not going to come apart. I also want to make sure that all of the props are actually extended out straight. So on this one, it is folded. We want to make sure that that is extended out straight. This just lessens the vibration when the machine goes to fire up. We also just want to double check and make sure that the landing gear locks are good, that our payload lock is on, and as well that we have an SD card here in the bottom. We also loaded the batteries already, but we want to make sure that we have the locking mechanism here turned and ready to go. So after we've double checked everything and made sure it was good to go, I'm going to go ahead and power it on by pressing once and holding down. From here, the ship itself will go through a calibration. We do not want to touch it during this time, and then make sure that also the camera is not going to be inhibited by doing its calibration or rotation. All right, so we have the pilot app opened, and we can verify that the Matrice 300 RTK is actually connected to the app as well as the remote. We can see that down here on the bottom left. Additionally, I have a connection to the H20T. You can also see that if either one of these don't populate after turning on the machine, you'll have to restart the actual system. We go into manual flight here. When we get into manual flight, we'll see a checklist right off the get-go. Right here, this is a spot for us to verify our return to home altitude and that all of the systems checks are normal. I can also see my aircraft battery level at 64% battery temperature. I want to make sure that I am on mode 2 here as far as flight goes. So something to double check and make sure. The rest of it's good to go, and you can format your SD card from this position or from this screen if you wanted to at this time. As we look straight into the UI itself, I'm looking at the FPV screen. If I jump over to basically H20 screen, if I jump over to the FPV screen, I can see a number of things that are showing up there. If I, again, take a look at the top right, I can see my battery levels just to confirm that those are good and operationally ready. Down on the bottom left, I have my map, and I can toggle between cameras if I have one installed on the right, and in this case we're using the H20. So in order to start the machine, I'm going to go into the corners, bottom left on the left and bottom right on the right. So I'm going to push into the corners, and the props will start spinning. You do want to make sure that nobody is in the way when taking off. I'm going to go ahead and give altitude climb here right off the ground. So with the left stick, I get it out and away from myself for a moment so I can do a quick function or systems check. So I just make sure that my rights and lefts are working, my forward and back is working on my cyclic, and then as well my rudder is working and my throttle is working. So as I fly out and away from myself, keeping in mind again any of the issues with airspace or anything like that, we just keeping an idea on that. As we take a look back at the UI here, as I move forward and back, you can see the horizon moving. We can see speed and direction. All of that is giving us information. And a really neat feature on the 300 is the compass heading. So you can also see that there is the home point that is generated on the screen, and it's a virtual home point to let us know where to come back to. So let's do that. Let's bring it on back and put her back on the ground. From here, there's a number of things that you can actually do to practice and understand the actual M300 and how she acts during flight. And sometimes getting used to the way it brakes or some of the sensors that it has, definitely practice. Full throttle down to land, so on the left stick I'm pulling the stick completely to the bottom to actually turn the motors off. and we don't let it go until it's done. So that's the conclusion of the Ready to Deploy video, in which we can just walk through all of the hardware, all of the software, as well as just a quick flight to understand. Don't forget that we have a lot of other training available on the RMUS Online Training Center that is available to you within that space. So that wraps it up for the Ready to Deploy video on the M300 RTK.